happens when Hollywood's biggest comeback story meets daytime TV's toughest interviewer? Johnny Depp just delivered the most savage response in talk show history, and Joy Behar had no idea how to respond. The audience gasped, the co-host froze, and social media absolutely exploded. Watch what happened when Johnny finally had enough. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now let's dive into what really happened. The studio lights were blazing, the cameras were rolling, and nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. Johnny Depp, Hollywood's most enigmatic star, sat across from Joy Behar on the iconic set of View, and what started as a routine celebrity interview quickly spiraled into one of the most jaw-dropping confrontations in daytime television history. The tension was palpable from the moment Depp walked onto that stage, his leather jacket and signature rings catching the studio lights as he settled into the guest chair. But what happened next left the audience gasping, the co-host speechless, and social media absolutely exploding with reactions that would dominate the internet for days. This wasn't just another celebrity appearance where a star promotes their latest project with rehearsed anecdotes and polite laughter. This was a clash of personalities, perspective, and pride that would dominate headlines for weeks to come, sparking debates in living rooms, office break rooms, and comment sections across the globe. As Joy Behar prepared her questions with that signature confidence she's known for, shuffling her note cards and exchanging knowing glances with her co-hosts, nobody in that studio realized they were about to witness a masterclass in composure, wit, and the kind of comeback that would be replayed millions of times across every platform imaginable. The atmosphere in the studio was electric even before the confrontation began. Audience members had lined up hours before the show, excited to see the legendary actor in person. Some held signs supporting Depp. Others simply wanted to witness what they hoped would be compelling television. The View's production team had promoted this appearance heavily, knowing that Depp's return to mainstream media would draw massive ratings. What they didn't anticipate was just how massive those ratings would become, and for reasons far beyond what anyone had scripted. As the segment began, there was an undercurrent of anticipation that seasoned television viewers could sense immediately. The way Joy leaned forward in her chair, the intensity in her eyes, the slight edge in her voice during the introduction, all signaled that this wasn't going to be a typical softball celebrity interview. Johnny Depp, for his part, seemed relaxed but alert, his eyes scanning the panel of hosts, perhaps already sensing the direction things might take. His decades in Hollywood had taught him to read a room, to anticipate when things might go sideways, and his instincts were clearly on high alert. The opening minutes featured the standard pleasantries, the kind of warm-up banner that puts guests at ease and gives viewers a chance to settle in. There were smiles, light jokes, and questions about Depp's latest creative endeavors. But experienced View watchers knew this was merely the calm before the storm. Joy Behar has built her reputation on asking the tough questions, on not letting celebrities hide behind their publicists' carefully crafted talking points. She prides herself on journalistic integrity, on holding public figures accountable, and on representing the questions that real Americans want answered. What nobody could have predicted was how dramatically the tone would shift, how quickly a simple question would escalate into a full-blown confrontation, and how Johnny Depp's response would not only defend his position, but would flip the entire narrative on its head. The moment Joy posed her first controversial question, you could see Depp's posture change subtly. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His fingers stopped their casual drumming on the armrest, and his eyes locked onto Joy with a focus that made it clear he wasn't going to play the game by the usual rules. The audience seemed to hold its collective breath. Even the camera operators adjusted their positions, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably, their expressions revealing that perhaps this line of questioning hadn't been fully discussed in the pre-show meeting. And then, in that charged moment, with millions watching both in the studio and at home, Johnny Depp did something that would change the trajectory of the entire interview and create a viral moment for the ages. He didn't back down, he didn't deflect with humor, and he didn't let the moment pass. Instead, he leaned forward, matched Joy's intensity, and prepared to deliver a response that nobody saw coming. Johnny Depp's appearance on The View was highly anticipated, marking a significant moment in his carefully orchestrated return to mainstream media. After years of public scrutiny, brutal legal battles that played out in courtrooms and across social media, and career challenges that would have broken lesser individuals. The beloved actor was making his rounds on talk shows to promote his latest project and reconnect with fans who had stood by him through thick and thin. His publicity team had strategically selected appearances that would allow him to control his narrative, to remind the world of his talent, and to show that he was ready to move forward with dignity and grace. The View seemed like the perfect platform for this comeback strategy. It's a show known for its diverse panel of strong, opinionated women who aren't afraid to tackle controversial subjects. The program reaches millions of viewers daily, predominantly women who make up a key demographic for entertainment decisions. The show's format, which blends celebrity interviews with discussions about current events and cultural issues, offered Depp the opportunity to address both his professional work and, if necessary, the personal challenges he'd faced. His team likely believed that appearing before this panel would demonstrate his willingness to face tough questions and engage with voices that might be critical of him. The booking had generated enormous buzz in entertainment media circles. Trade publications speculated about what questions would be asked, whether the host would address the controversies directly, and how Depp would handle himself under what could potentially be hostile questioning. Social media erupted with opinions before the actor even set foot on the stage. Supporters rallied with hashtags and messages of encouragement, while critics questioned whether he deserved such a prominent platform. The View's producers knew they had ratings gold on their hands, and they promoted the upcoming appearance relentlessly across their network and social media channels. As Depp settled into the guest chair, adjusting his signature accessories and exchanging pleasantries with the host, the interview began smoothly enough. There was a customary applause from the audience, warm smiles from the panel, and energy that suggested this might actually be a positive, uplifting conversation. The co-host started with safe territory, asking about his recent work, the characters that had defined a career, and what it felt like to be back in front of cameras doing what he loved. Depp responded with a charm and wit that had made him a beloved figure for decades, sharing anecdotes about his creative process, the directors he admired, and his thoughts on returning to the spotlight after such a turbulent period. For those first several minutes, it seemed like the interview might proceed without incident. Depp spoke eloquently about his passion for acting, his respect for the craft, and his gratitude for fans who had never abandoned him. The audience responded warmly, laughing at his jokes and applauding his more poignant observations about art and resilience. Even the co-host seemed charmed, nodding along and offering supportive comments. It was exactly the kind of redemption narrative that makes for compelling television, a feel-good segment that viewers could enjoy without controversy or discomfort. But Joy Behar, never one to shy away from controversial topics, and perhaps feeling that the interview was becoming too comfortable, had other plans brewing. You could see in her eyes, the way she glanced down at her notes, the subtle shift in her expression that veteran talk show viewers recognized immediately. She was preparing to pivot, to steer the conversation away from the safe harbor of professional accomplishments and into the choppy waters of personal controversy. Joy has built her career on asking the questions that others might avoid, on holding public figures accountable, and on representing viewers who feel that celebrities shouldn't get a free pass just because they're talented or charming. The transition was almost surgical in its precision. Joy waited for a natural pause in the conversation, then began steering the discussion toward Depp's personal life, his past legal troubles, and the media circus that had surrounded him for years. Her tone changed from conversational to interrogatory, her questions becoming more pointed, more loaded with implications. She referenced tabloid headlines, public accusations, and court proceedings with a directness that immediately altered the entire energy of the set. The atmosphere shifted noticeably and dramatically. Depp's body language changed in ways that body language experts would later analyze in countless YouTube breakdown videos. His relaxed posture became more rigid, his casual hand gesture stopped, and his smile, which had been genuine and warm, became more guarded and measured. The sparkle in his eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by a wariness that suggested he was now on high alert. Viewers at home, watching through their television screens, could sense something was brewing beneath the surface, that uncomfortable tension that makes you lean close at the screen because you know something significant is about to happen. Joy pressed forward with questions that many viewers, both in the studio and at home, felt crossed the line from legitimate journalism into personal judgment. She wasn't just asking for clarification or seeking his perspective. Her questions seemed designed to put him on the defensive, to make him justify his past, to relitigate issues that had already been resolved in courts of law. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken, perhaps recognizing that this was veering into territory that might alienate viewers or create controversy beyond what was necessary for good television. And that's when everything changed. That's when Johnny Depp made a decision that would define this interview and create the viral moment that millions would watch and debate. Joy Behar leaned forward with a pointed question that seemed designed more to provoke than to inform, her voice taking on that prosecutorial tone that regular viewers of The View know all too well. She referenced tabloid headlines as if they were established facts, cited rumors that had been thoroughly debunked, and asked Depp to defend himself against accusations that had already been litigated in court, ruled upon by judges, and settled in the public record. The implication was clear. She wasn't interested in his side of the story or the legal outcomes. She wanted him to justify his existence on her stage, to grovel or apologize for things he had already been cleared of. The audience grew visibly uncomfortable, and you could feel the energy in the studio shift from anticipation to unease. Some audience members shifted awkwardly in their seats, crossing and uncrossing their arms, unsure of how to react to what was unfolding before them. Others exchanged pointed glances with their neighbors, their expressions seeming to say, "Is this really happening? And this feels wrong." A few audience members who had been enthusiastically supportive moments earlier now sat in stunned silence, processing the aggressive turn the interview had taken. The studio, which had been warm and welcoming just minutes before, now felt tense and confrontational. The camera operators, trained professionals who had seen countless interviews, instinctively tightened their shots, sensing that they needed to capture every micro-expression, every subtle reaction. The production team in the control room likely felt their pulses quicken, knowing they were witnessing something that would either be brilliant television or a public relations nightmare, possibly both. This was the kind of unscripted moment that networks both dread and dream about, the collision of personalities and principles that creates unforgettable television. But Johnny Depp didn't crumble under the pressure. He didn't stumble over his words, didn't become defensive or angry, and didn't give Joy the reaction she seemed to be fishing for. Instead, he did something unexpected that would become the defining characteristic of this entire exchange. With the calm demeanor of someone who had weathered far worse storms than a confrontational talk show host, someone who had survived actual courtroom battles and emerged victorious, he politely but firmly pushed back against the narrative Joy was trying to construct. His voice remained steady, measured, and clear as he began his response. He reminded Joy, and by extension the millions of viewers watching, that he had been vindicated in court, that actual judges and juries had heard all the evidence and reached their conclusions. He pointed out that the truth had come out through proper legal channels, not through gossip columns and biased media coverage. And then, with a directness that was both respectful and devastating, he suggested that perhaps it was time for the media to move beyond sensationalism and focus on facts, on what had actually been proven rather than what made for clickable headlines. The statement landed like a thunderbolt. You could see it register on Joy's face, the slight widening of her eyes, the stiffening of her posture. She wasn't used to being challenged so directly and articulately on her own show, in front of her own audience, on her own turf. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, she seemed unsure of how to respond. But Joy Behar didn't become a prominent television personality by backing down from confrontation. She doubled down, her voice rising slightly in volume and intensity. She interrupted him mid-sentence, talking over his points as if the volume of her voice could override the substance of his arguments. She dismissed his references to court verdicts as irrelevant to public opinion, tried to redirect the narrative back to her preferred talking points about accountability and public perception. Her hands gestured more emphatically, her facial expressions became more animated, and her determination to win this exchange became increasingly apparent to everyone watching. The other co-hosts looked increasingly uncomfortable with how the interview was unfolding. Some sat rigidly in their chairs, their professional smiles frozen in place. Others glanced toward the producers off camera, as if seeking guidance on whether to intervene or let the moment play out naturally. A few attempted to interject with softer questions or comments designed to diffuse the tension, but their voices were drowned out by the intensity of the exchange between Joy and Depp. The audience reaction became equally divided, split between audible gasps at particularly sharp exchanges and spontaneous applause when either participant scored what seemed like a rhetorical point, creating a chaotic energy that filled the studio and made the scene feel more like a debate stage than a daytime talk show set. That's when Depp delivered a line that would echo across the internet for weeks to come, the moment that would be clipped, shared, analyzed, and memed into viral immortality. With perfect timing that only decades of performing could provide, and a slight smile that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing and how it would land, he calmly and methodically dismantled Joy's argument piece by piece. He used her own logic against her, pointing out that if we're going to hold celebrities accountable for accusations, then we must also hold the media accountable for the damage they cause when those accusations prove false. He highlighted the double standards and how the media treats different celebrities, how some are given endless second chances, while others are condemned without trial, how gender, politics, and public sentiment seem to matter more than actual facts or legal outcomes. He spoke about the presumption of innocence, about the danger of trial by media, about the real human cost of character assassination in the digital age. His words were sharp but never cruel, pointed but never petty, devastating but delivered with such composure that they seemed almost gentle. The precision of his words, the unshakable composure of his delivery, and the undeniable truth embedded in his message left Joy visibly flustered for perhaps the first time in her long television career. She attempted several responses, starting sentences and then stopping, searching for the comeback that wouldn't come. Her co-host remained largely silent, recognizing that this was a moment that needed to resolve itself without interference. And the audience, sensing they had witnessed something extraordinary, erupted into the loudest applause of the entire segment. The moment the show cut to commercial, you could practically feel the shockwaves rippling through social media like an earthquake spreading across the digital landscape. Before the commercial break had even ended, Twitter exploded with clips of the exchange, with multiple hashtags trending worldwide within minutes. Hashtag Johnny Depp, hashtag The View, hashtag Joy Behar, and various combinations thereof dominated the trending topics in countries across multiple continents. The footage spread with velocity that social media analysts would later describe as remarkable even by today's viral content standards. YouTube channels, both major entertainment outlets and independent creators, rushed to upload the footage, racing against each other to be first with a clip that would generate millions of views. Reaction videos flooded every platform imaginable within the hour, with content creators from every niche weighing in. Legal analysts broke down Depp's arguments from a jurisprudence perspective. Body language experts dissected every gesture and micro-expression. Media critics examined the ethics of Joy's questioning. Even creators who typically focused on completely unrelated content couldn't resist commenting on what had quickly become the most talked-about television moment of the year. Team Depp supporters, who had remained fiercely loyal throughout his legal struggles, celebrated what they saw as a long-overdue moment of vindication and public redemption. They created compilation videos, tribute edits, and highlight reels that positioned Depp as someone who had finally been given a platform to speak his truth without being shouted down or misrepresented. Fan art depicting the moment flooded Instagram and TikTok. Supportive messages poured in from fellow actors, musicians, and public figures who had remained silent during the height of the controversies, but now felt emboldened to voice their support. Meanwhile, others debated whether the confrontation had been appropriate for daytime television, whether either party had crossed professional boundaries, and what this moment meant for the future of celebrity interviews. Think pieces appeared on major news websites within hours, with headlines ranging from Johnny Depp's masterclass in media accountability to Did The View cross a line? Media ethics professors were contacted for comment. Former talk show hosts weighed in on what they would have done differently. The conversation expanded far beyond just the individuals involved to encompass larger questions about journalism, celebrity culture, and public redemption. What made the moment particularly powerful and caused it to resonate so deeply with audiences was Depp's remarkable restraint throughout the entire exchange. Despite being provoked, despite facing questions that many viewed as unfair or inappropriate, he never raised his voice above a conversational tone. He never resorted to personal attacks against Joy or any of the co-hosts. He never lost his cool or allowed emotion to override his measured, articulate responses. This composure, especially in contrast to the aggressive questioning he faced, made his position appear all the more credible and sympathetic to viewers. He simply stated facts, referenced actual court outcomes rather than media narratives, defended his truth with receipts and evidence rather than emotional appeals, and refused to be bullied or steamrolled on live television. His approach was textbook crisis communication, the kind of performance that public relations professionals would later use as a teaching example. He demonstrated that you don't need to shout to be heard, that facts presented calmly can be more powerful than accusations delivered loudly, and that maintaining dignity under pressure can be its own form of victory. In contrast, Joy's visible frustration and her repeated attempts to talk over him, to redirect when she was losing ground argumentatively, only made her position look weaker to neutral observers. Body language experts noted her defensive posture, her inability to maintain eye contact when Depp made his most pointed observations, and the way her confidence seemed to deflate as the exchange progressed. Even viewers who typically agreed with Joy's perspectives on other issues found themselves questioning her approach in this particular instance. The optics, as political consultants would say, were simply not in her favor. The other View co-hosts, clearly sensing that the interview had veered into uncomfortable and potentially damaging territory, tried valiantly to move the conversation forward and restore some semblance of normalcy to the show. They posed lighter questions, attempted to steer back toward Depp's creative work, and injected humor where possible to diffuse the lingering tension. Their efforts were professional and well-intentioned, showing the experience that had made them successful television personalities in their own right. But the damage, or the victory depending on your perspective and whose side you were on, had already been done. The defining moment of the interview had passed, and everything that followed would be viewed through that lens. The remainder of the interview was notably more subdued, with the energy in the studio feeling almost deflated compared to the intensity that had preceded the commercial break. Joy took a back seat, allowing her co-host to lead the questioning, speaking only occasionally and avoiding any further confrontational topics. Whether this was a strategic retreat, a producer's intervention, or simply Joy recognizing that further escalation would only compound the situation, the shift was obvious to everyone watching. The other hosts attempted to salvage what had become one of the most talked-about moments in the show's long and storied history, but they were essentially trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. The interview concluded with polite thank yous and applause, but everyone knew that the headlines, the clips, and the conversations would all focus on those few explosive minutes when Johnny Depp and Joy Behar had their confrontation. As Depp left the stage and the show moved on to its next segment, the digital wildfire was already spreading, ensuring that this moment would be discussed, debated, and dissected for weeks to come. This confrontation represented something far bigger than just two celebrities clashing on television, far more significant than a momentary heated exchange that would be forgotten by the next news cycle. It highlighted and brought into sharp focus the ongoing conversation about media responsibility in an age where accusations can destroy reputations instantaneously, about the fundamental principle presumption of innocence that seems increasingly forgotten in the court of public opinion, and about how public figures are treated when they fall from grace and attempt to rebuild their lives and careers in the unforgiving glare of constant scrutiny. The incident became a cultural touchstone, referenced in journalism schools as a case study in interview ethics, discussed in media literacy classes as an example of how narratives are constructed and challenged, and cited in legal circles as evidence of the lasting damage that can occur even after someone has been vindicated in court. It raised uncomfortable questions that society continues to grapple with. At what point does holding someone accountable cross the line into perpetual punishment? How do we balance the legitimate need for journalism to ask tough questions with the equally legitimate right of individuals to move forward after being cleared? Who gets to decide when someone has sufficiently paid for alleged transgressions, especially when those allegations were never proven or were explicitly disproven? For Johnny Depp, this moment became another crucial chapter in his remarkable comeback story, a public demonstration that he wasn't going to remain silent in the face of continued attempts to define him by his worst moments rather than by the totality of his life and work. It showed that he wouldn't passively accept false narratives about his life, wouldn't allow media personalities to weaponize discredited accusations, and wouldn't be intimidated into silence by the power dynamic of being a guest on someone else's show. The incident reinforced to his supporters that their faith had been well placed, demonstrated to his critics that he could defend himself articulately without aggression, and showed to the industry that he was back not as a chastened figure seeking forgiveness, but as someone demanding to be judged on facts rather than sensationalism. The moment also became a rallying point for others who felt they had been unfairly treated by media coverage, who saw in Depp's composed pushback a template for how to respond when faced with questions designed more to shame than to illuminate. It sparked conversations in Hollywood green rooms and publicist offices about how to prepare clients for potentially hostile interviews, about whether certain shows or interviewers should be avoided entirely, and about the changing power dynamics between media and celebrity in an age where stars can reach audiences directly through social media without traditional gatekeepers. For Joy Behar in The View, the incident served as a stark reminder that guests might not always follow the expected script, that prepared questions don't always lead to anticipated answers, and that live television can produce unexpected moments that take on a life of their own beyond anyone's control. The show faced criticism from viewers who felt the questioning had been unnecessarily hostile, from media ethicists who questioned whether reopening settled legal matters served any journalistic purpose, and from former supporters who felt that Joy had allowed her personal opinions to override fair interviewing practices. The View's producers had to address the incident internally, likely reviewing their pre-interview processes and considering how to handle similar situations in the future. But the show also gained viewers' attention, proving once again the old media adage that controversy drives ratings. Some viewers appreciated Joy's willingness to ask tough questions regardless of potential backlash, viewing her approach as holding powerful men accountable rather than as unfair harassment. The diversity of reactions demonstrated how polarized public opinion had become, not just about Depp specifically, but about larger questions of justice, redemption, and media ethics. The incident sparked countless discussions across multiple platforms about interview ethics and journalistic responsibility. Media critics debated whether Joy had crossed professional lines or had simply done her job as a journalist. Journalism professors used the clip in their classes to discuss the difference between adversarial interviewing and hostile interrogation. Former talk show hosts weighed in on podcasts and in op-eds about the changing nature of celebrity interviews, and whether the traditional formats still serve audiences well in an era of heightened awareness about power dynamics and public shaming. The role of daytime talk shows in shaping public opinion came under renewed scrutiny. These shows reach millions of predominantly female viewers daily, influencing conversations at dinner tables and water coolers across the country. The Depp-Behar exchange raised questions about whether these platforms had become too powerful, whether hosts had too much unchecked influence, and whether the format that worked for decades needed to evolve to reflect changing social values around fairness, accountability, and second chances. Perhaps most fundamentally, the incident forced a broader cultural conversation about whether celebrities and public figures deserve a chance to move forward after being cleared of allegations, or whether being accused, regardless of outcome, should permanently define someone's public identity. It highlighted the uncomfortable reality that vindication in court doesn't always translate to vindication in public opinion, that media narratives can persist long after facts have been established, and that the digital age's permanent record makes true fresh starts nearly impossible. Whatever your perspective on the confrontation, whether you view Depp as a victim finally getting to tell his truth or as a celebrity using his platform to avoid accountability, whether you saw Joy as a fearless journalist or as someone letting personal bias cloud professional judgment, one thing was undeniable to everyone who watched. This was a moment that would be remembered, analyzed, and debated for years to come. It would be studied in media classes, referenced in discussions about cancel culture and redemption, and cited as evidence by people on all sides of debates about justice, media ethics, and public rehabilitation. The confrontation secured its place in the archives of unforgettable television moments, right alongside other instances when live TV produced genuine, unscripted human conflict that revealed deeper truths about our society and values. Years from now, people will still remember where they were when they watched Johnny Depp and Joy Behar face off on The View, still debate who was right and who was wrong, and still grapple with the larger questions that moment forced us all to confront about fairness, forgiveness, and the power of media to shape lives and reputations.